Yesterday, Trump dropped one line that mattered more than any airstrike. Quoting him exactly, "It's our turn." Sit with that phrase for a moment. That is the head of the world's most powerful armed forces, telling Tehran flatly that a line has been crossed. But right behind that comment came a second one, and almost no outlet touched it. He said America's ammunition cupboards are full and plentiful. Full and plentiful. Hold on to that line. We're circling back to it because that sentence explains more about the real state of this war than any strike package, any summit, any headline. CENTCOM confirmed this morning that it had just run what it's calling a heavy wave of strikes on Iran, twice the force of any earlier round. Dozens of IRGC sites were hit, command centers, missile and drone facilities, coastal radar networks, naval assets. The command says more than 50,000 American troops in the theater are, in their words, highly vigilant, focused, lethal, and ready. That same day, Trump hosted Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu at the White House. Netanyahu arrived with a single ask: finish it. Not just the nuclear sites, not just the missile program, the whole military structure, the drones, the missiles, and the network of proxies running from Tehran through Gaza, Lebanon, Yemen, and Iraq. Sources close to that meeting say some in the room stopped hinting and said the words outright: regime change. Also that day, Trump met with Saudi Arabia's defense minister, Prince Khalid bin Salman, who personally carried a sealed letter from Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Nobody has revealed what it said, but less than 24 hours later, the U.S. and Saudi Arabia carried out their first joint strike of the entire conflict, hitting Iran-aligned PMF units inside Iraq. At least 20 fighters were killed. Every major outlet ran some version of the same headline. America strikes back, Trump escalates, IRGC targets wiped out. On paper, that reads like a winning campaign. But today, I'm not interested in who's ahead. I want to ask something uglier, something almost nobody in the mainstream press seems willing to ask: how does this trap actually end? Because once you line up the CSIS report that dropped on July 30th with the situation unfolding in Malaysian waters, with the strike on an Egyptian LNG terminal, with a classified order Admiral Brad Cooper quietly signed 3 days ago, you get a picture that looks nothing like the one on cable news. Let's walk through it. The story you're being told. Here's the version the mainstream press is feeding you. Iran hits a U.S. base in Jordan, America answers with airstrikes, Iran threatens more, and the cycle repeats. What analysts call an escalation spiral. Harlan Ullman, a former U.S. Navy officer who spent time in rooms like these, said it plainly: if this hasn't been thought through, we get caught in this escalatory cycle where we head nowhere except up and up and up. That's the mainstream take. Two sides trading blows, nobody winning outright, and diplomacy the only real exit. Maybe that's accurate? Maybe. But that framing buries three facts, and once you see all three together, the whole narrative collapses. Fact 1. Iran rewrote the rules. The strike on Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan, 5 or 6 ballistic missiles, everyone intercepted, wasn't a retaliatory move. It wasn't Iran answering an earlier American bombing run. For the first time in this entire war, Iran struck first. Not a response, an opening move. And Iran chose to launch it at the exact moment Trump was telling the world negotiations were going very powerful, very friendly, right in the thick of active diplomacy. That looks reckless until you see the logic behind it. Iran needed to break what strategists call the no war, no peace stalemate, the slow grind where its proxy network and regional leverage rode month after month without ever reaching a real confrontation. Iran needed Washington cornered into one of two choices: negotiate for real or escalate to a level nobody can control. In other words, they called Trump's bluff. Fact 2, the war just left the Persian Gulf. The same day those missiles hit Jordan, an Iranian drone struck the port of Damietta, Egypt, targeting 2 LNG carriers, the Energos Winter and the Gaslog Salem. Damietta isn't a minor port. It's one of Egypt's major liquefied natural gas export terminals, and that gas flows straight to Europe. So think about what actually happened here. Iran isn't just hitting American bases in the Gulf, and it isn't just choking the Strait of Hormuz. It's reaching into the Mediterranean and touching Europe's energy supply directly. This stopped being a regional Gulf conflict. This is now a global energy story, and most people watching cable news this morning have never even heard about Damietta. Fact 3, the core American strategy is failing. From day one, Washington's stated mission wasn't limited to bombing Iran. It was to dismantle the entire proxy web. The Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the PMF in Iraq, Quds Force assets in Syria, Hamas in Gaza. The theory was simple: sever the limbs and Iran loses its reach across the region. So what's actually happening? The PMF, just hit by joint US-Saudi strikes, turned around the very next day and launched drones into Saudi Arabia's eastern province. The Houthis still hold huge stretches of the Red Sea, and Iranian drones just struck Egypt. The network isn't collapsing, it's scattering and adapting. Cut off one head, 3 more show up somewhere else. The mainstream story wants you to picture a straight line. America strikes, Iran weakens, Iran eventually breaks. That's not what's happening. What's happening is far messier and far more dangerous. The real structure, 2 traps at once. Here's the framework. Right now, 2 separate traps are running simultaneously, and the reason this war feels unsolvable is that each one feeds the other. Trap 1, asymmetric attrition. In game theory, this describes 2 sides competing in the same fight while paying wildly different costs. Picture a small independent shop facing a giant chain that decides to take over the block. The chain slashes prices. The shop matches. The chain slashes again. The shop matches again. The question stops being who's stronger. It becomes who runs out of money first. Apply that to the Strait of Hormuz. Every time Iran fires a ballistic missile at a U.S. base, America has to fire an interceptor to knock it down. A Patriot interceptor runs roughly $4 million. A THAAD interceptor runs roughly $12 million. An Iranian ballistic missile costs a fraction of that. And Iran keeps making more. Iran also just took delivery of 300 to 400 new Chinese-made shoulder-fired anti-aircraft systems capable of downing fighter jets. That's not theoretical. It's already happened. One F-15E has been shot down. One F-35 was hit by Iranian air defenses. Meanwhile, the U.S. is fighting this on 3 fronts at once. Military, nonstop strikes at double intensity. Financial, OFAC sanctions. The Treasury just hit 2 IRGC-linked maritime insurers and 8 ships from Iran's shadow fleet. And geoeconomic, a naval blockade they're calling the Steel Wall. The trouble is, when none of those 3 fronts is delivering a decisive result, you're not winning on 3 fronts, you're bleeding on 3 fronts. And here's a detail that brings that bleeding into sharp focus, not a think tank paper, an actual military order. Admiral Brad Cooper, head of U.S. Central Command, and the man overseeing every American force in West Asia, signed a confidential directive on July 28th. Subject, cell phone confiscation. Cooper ordered mobile devices taken from American troops stationed in the Gulf. Why? Because Iran is pulling real-time battlefield intelligence straight off soldiers' social media. Photos posted minutes after an Iranian strike, videos of troops sprinting for cover, comment threads revealing exactly how effective a missile was before the Pentagon has even drafted a statement. Cooper wrote, and this is a direct quote, "The direct unavoidable cost of this open source intelligence could be measured in the lives of American service members." The example he cited, a U.S. service member wearing Meta smart glasses filmed himself running for shelter during an Iranian strike on Al-Assad Air Base on July 17th, then posted it. Iran watched it. Iran studied it. Iran adjusted. Sit with that. The most technologically advanced military in human history, satellite surveillance, cyber capability, AI-assisted targeting, and it's losing the information war to its own troops' Instagram accounts. That's not how a confident, in-control operation behaves. Trap 2, reputation. This is the one almost nobody discusses, and it may be the more dangerous of the 2. The real question isn't whether America has enough missiles. We've already answered that. The real question is, even with unlimited missiles, could Trump actually end this war? Run that through reputation theory, the academic framework explaining how leaders get boxed into positions they can't walk back from, and the answer is no, not because he doesn't want to stop, because the political machinery around him makes stopping politically suicidal. Here's the breakdown, layer by layer. Layer 1, James Fearon and audience costs. Fearon, one of the most cited political scientists of the last generation, argued that in democracies, leaders who make public threats pay a steep price for backing down. Voters punish anyone who looks weak or inconsistent. Now look at Trump's domestic numbers right now. Reuters and Ipsos found that only 1/3 of Americans back this war. 69% say the administration has never clearly stated its objectives. Gas prices have climbed past $4 a gallon after 5 months of continuous strikes. And inflation is squeezing households. Then Iran hits a U.S. base in Jordan. At that instant, Trump has zero room to not respond. Not militarily, not strategically, and certainly not politically. Restraint gets branded as weakness by his opponents, the press, and even parts of his own base. Midterms land in November 2026. That's the essence of audience costs. Military choices being driven by the election calendar, not battlefield logic. Layer 2, Shai Puri and Randall Schweller on status signaling. These 2 scholars made an argument I keep returning to. International status signaling, they wrote, typically flows from domestic political battles over legitimacy. Translated, when you watch CENTCOM's heavy wave briefing, when you hear Trump say, "It's our turn," that show isn't primarily aimed at Iran. It's aimed at American voters. The strikes function as a communication tool, a proof of strength for the home audience heading into an election. The bombs are the message. The audience is domestic. Layer 3, William Nomikos and the Cost of Looking Incompetent. Nomikos built on Fearon's model by showing voters don't only punish weakness, they punish visible failure. And look what just happened. The ceasefire that was supposed to hold collapsed outright. Trump's diplomatic push, his deterrence framework, his back-channel effort through Oman, none of it stopped the July 29th attack. That's a documented failure. If Trump doesn't answer with an unmistakable show of force, he's not just seen as weak, he's seen as incompetent. So he stages a massive show of deterrence, not to shift the battlefield, but to shift the story at home and paper over the fact that the last round of diplomacy fell apart. Layer 4, the low flame strategy and what Israel is quietly saying. Israeli officials have reportedly told journalists they're less worried about the strikes than about their intensity. Their concern is that Washington is deliberately keeping this conflict at what they call a low temperature because of oil. A dramatic escalation, hitting bridges, power plants, oil infrastructure deep inside Iran, would send global oil prices spiking, pushing American gas from $4 towards $6, which would be politically fatal for Trump before November. So the administration is boxed into hitting only coastal, symbolic, dual-use targets, a performance of strength rather than a real campaign. That explains an otherwise strange contradiction. Trump vows to beat the hell out of Iran, yet CENTCOM keeps striking the same target categories it hit 16 days ago. The rhetoric sits at a 10. The military action sits at a 3. That's not a contradiction. That's the design. The noise and the action are doing two different jobs. Layer 5, Hans Morgenthau and prestige policy. Morgenthau, the father of modern realist international relations theory, wrote that prestige-based policy works best when a nation projects overwhelming strength precisely so it never has to prove it. The threat itself is supposed to be enough. But once the actual capability starts eroding, stockpiles thinning, jets going down, soldiers losing their phones because Iran is watching their TikToks, prestige policy flips. You're forced to talk louder about your strength at exactly the moment that strength is in doubt. The declaration becomes a substitute for reality. Which brings us back to Trump's line, America's ammunition cupboards are full and plentiful. CSIS data shows the U.S. has burned through roughly a third of its Patriot interceptors and half its THAAD interceptors in 16 days. Under Morgenthau's framework, that statement isn't just an exaggeration. It's the behavior of a leader in the grip of a prestige crisis, keeping up the appearance of invulnerability because admitting otherwise is the worst option. Layer 6, Jeremy Shapiro and the playground bully. Shapiro, of the European Council on Foreign Relations, wrote an analysis of Trump's diplomatic style that I keep coming back to. His words, Trump behaves like a playground bully, projecting overwhelming dominance on the outside while remaining deeply averse to any fight that carries genuine consequences. Seen through that lens, lines like, it's our turn, or threats to hit bridges and power plants aren't signs of confidence. They're the opposite. They signal a side unwilling to commit to the level of force actually required to win decisively. And Iran has been reading this pattern for years. Layer 7, the credibility trap. Research on compellence theory, how states use threats to change an adversary's behavior, points to a brutal paradox. The more often a superpower threatens without following through, the less weight each new threat carries. The U.S. has drawn line after line with Iran over the years and stopped short of decisive escalation each time. Iran has learned the pattern. Every new threat lands lighter than the last, and that lesson now shapes every calculation Tehran makes. So here's the full architecture. 2 traps, both active at once. Trap 1, physical capability, ammunition, and air defenses is draining faster than it can be restocked. The attrition math favors Iran. Trap 2, Trump can't stop even if he wanted to, because the reputation and prestige dynamics keep pushing toward more escalation regardless of what the battlefield actually shows. And the feedback loop is brutal. The weaker America's real position gets, the louder Trump has to project strength. The louder the projection, the more military action it takes to back it up. The more action, the faster the stockpiles drain. The faster they drain, the weaker the real position becomes. And Iran is watching every cycle of that loop play out in real time through American soldiers' own social media, taking the other side seriously. Before I tear this down, I want to give the strongest version of the opposing case because intellectual honesty demands it. Here's the steelman. America has the largest, most advanced military on the planet. It can manufacture more interceptors. It can widen its target list to include Iranian civilian infrastructure, bridges, power plants, ports, water systems, making the war unbearable for ordinary Iranians. Saudi Arabia just joined the coalition. Iran's economy is running triple-digit inflation. Its people are suffering. Its proxy network is under pressure on every front. Israel remains a wild card. All America needs is patience to finish what it started. That's a real argument held by serious, experienced people. Now let's take it apart, piece by piece.